I am a rule follower who happens to be married to a rule stretcher. It's not that he doesn't follow rules, he just approaches them differently than I do. Anyone else have a partnership like that? And I don't think this is new to married life for me. Growing up, this happened in a number of my friendships as well. My attitude toward rules was fairly black and white. And that's not always a bad thing, right? I mean, rules and boundaries are there to protect people, to offer systems that clarify what was otherwise confusing. Way back in Genesis, in the story of creation, God divides the day from night and the water from the sky, and this provides order in the midst of chaos. Here in Matthew chapter 12, it starts by describing Jesus going through a grain field, which happens to be on the day observed as Sabbath. In this story of creation, we read that God rested on the seventh day. So the Jewish people determined that we should also observe a day of rest as we honor God. So this story in Matthew continues by describing that the disciples were hungry. So they started collecting food from that field they were walking through. However, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, they were not impressed. They point out that working on the Sabbath was not allowed according to the religious rules. And they ask Jesus what he has to say for himself. Now, this whole scenario to us might be hard to imagine. Sundays, which modern Christians would equate with a day of Sabbath, Sundays are filled with lots of things, let's be honest. So much so that many churches now offer Wednesday night worship simply because families aren't home on Sundays at all. But for the Pharisees, a rule is a rule. And the next thing we know, Jesus enters a synagogue with these Pharisees, and they encounter a man, and this man has some sort of deformity on his hand. So these Pharisees, they try to trick Jesus by asking if he thinks it's written within the law that he can heal the man. Again, this is hard for us to comprehend in our modern day context, but the rules of the day allowed for healing on the Sabbath only if it was a life-threatening illness. So to these Pharisees, a man with a withered hand just wouldn't fit the bill. But we know from Jesus' past instances of healing that to him, the rules simply don't work this way. If the man's withered hand was preventing him from full participation in society, then not even the Sabbath could hold Jesus back from offering healing, from providing this man with peace. Throughout this chapter, Matthew continues to report confrontations between Jesus and the religious leaders. They're simply not happy with what they observe, with what they think seems to be an utter lack of care for rituals or rules. And it's not that Jesus disregards all order. Remember back to that Sermon on the Mount? Those powerful words are meant to teach a community how to live as followers of Jesus. In fact, the entire book of Matthew helps guide us to be the church. Fun fact, in the original language of Greek that Matthew was written in, the word ecclesia means assembly or church. And that word is used later on in Matthew. And this is unique because none of the other Gospels, Mark, Luke, or John, include that word at all. So to us, that's an indicator that Matthew is pointing to the ways that the community is invited to live as Jesus followers. Instructions, rules, guidelines, they do matter. But when they fail to honor someone's humanity, that's when it's worth revisiting our perspective. So today, wonder with me, number 1. When have you seen religious rules actually bring order to chaos? And number 2, when have you seen religious rules threaten or hurt someone's humanity?